This word in your earmark is brought to you courtesy of NordVPN. VPN, you'll need no reminding, stands for...
Virtual Private Network.
Say it again.
Virtual Private Network, folks.
And what is that, Mark? It's a way to keep your data safe on the internet, wherever you're logging in, either at home or abroad. It protects your identity and encrypts your data. What does it do, Mark? It encrypts
I think it encrypts your data and does it very effectively, actually.
It does.
Very promptly.
And it does it so that nobody can steal your identity, because I know many people are after your identity.
Yes, they do. There's so many people would like to be me internationally.
And seriously, it probably are people. And at the same time, there's a fun side. It enables you to access the internet via servers in more than 50 different countries, Mark. You can choose whether you want to be in Singapore or Latvia or the United States or Australia or Brazil or wherever. And this has the advantage of meaning you can often sidestep region restrictions and stream movies and TV programs from all around the world. I'll tell you what I've been watching on the telly.
Go on.
In the last week or so. I don't know if you ever come across it. Delhi Crime.
No.
Is it's sort of Indian Canadian production, and it's basically a police procedural set in Delhi, in India, and so it's like, if you can imagine, The Wire was set in Delhi rather than Baltimore.
Fantastic.
And compared to Baltimore, Delhi makes Baltimore look like, I don't know,
upmarket.
Stoke Poges.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Virginia Water.
Virginia Water. I think it's really quite good. And it's just watching the first series. I think they've done 2 series. And this one's based on real crime, horrific crime that actually occurred in India about 10 years ago. But I tell you what I think is really good about it. It's 2 things. It's like, I think we had this conversation a while ago when we both watched Call My Agent, the French series. The great thing about it is you're traveling to a place. In the case of Paris, we've been to Paris, but I've never been to Delhi. So this is obviously shot in Delhi. So it feels like a city the like of which you never personally experienced at all. It's very low-rise buildings, loads of dust, and apparent chaos everywhere. Everywhere you look, you can't believe this place possibly functions, but somehow it kind of does. But the other thing, what's more important? What I increasingly value is seeing a cast that I've never seen before.
Well, I agree, because you don't have to make any adjustments at all. You've got no emotional attachment to anybody. And you don't have to think, I remember them. What have I seen them in before? And are they convincing in this? And I agree with you.
And also, with the average kind of BBC or standard Netflix or whatever, if it's the that big star, it'll all work out fine for her. It just will, because it always works out fine for big stars. Whereas
you don't know exactly who
you've no idea
the good Lord is rooting for.
You've no idea at all. And, so I would recommend this. I do think one of the great benefits of streaming television over the last few years is we've been allowed access to other countries' drama in a way that simply would not have happened if it had been. I mean, I know we had Scandi noir and all that kind of thing, but it didn't really go any further than that, So my wife went through a period of watching, every time I went in the room where she was watching television, she was watching sort of Orthodox Jews, in various different dramas.
We saw all of those. That was there's a vogue for it, wasn't there? And they were really good.
It's really good.
Although I can't see kind of Indian crime being a thing like Scandi noir. I don't know why, but maybe.
No, well, I don't think you can't make it glamorous or attractive. It's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it is kind of gripping, because you think, what is this like trying to do this job against the background of Delhi? It's like policing in Victorian London, but with mobile phones. So it's very good. Anyway, so, that's one of the many things I've been watching on telly. I don't watch that much telly, but, when you watch telly, you want to watch things you want to watch, don't you? So back to NordVPN. You can take advantage of a deal where you can try NordVPN by going to nordvpn.com/yourear, or just use the code YourEar to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and 1 additional month for free and a bonus gift. And it's risk-free because there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. As ever, full details in the show notes.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So here we go, a Stackwaddy game. I've got a Stackwaddy game for you, Mark. I'm going to spring this on you. And what you've got to tell me is, are the following, are they saucy advertising slogans or James Brown songs? Okay?
Very good.
Saucy advertising slogans or James Brown songs. So one of these is James Brown's song. Okay, the rest are saucy advertising slogans. The first one is, you might want to write these down, and people at home might like to play along. Get a pen and paper.
Pen and paper.
Call your nearest
and a large, relaxing drink
into the room and say, "Let's try this. Are these saucy advertising slogans, or are they James Brown songs?" Okay, the first one. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Next one. Is it in you? Is it in you? Next one. It's so big you've got to grin to get it in.
Oh dear.
Here we go. Yeah. Good. The next one. Good to the last drop. Good to the last drop.
Yeah.
The next one. For goodness sakes, look at those cakes. For goodness sakes, look at those cakes. And finally, when it fits, you feel it. Okay, I'm going to run them down again. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Is it in you? It's so big you've got to grin to get it in. Good to the last drop. For goodness sakes, look at those cakes. And finally, when it fits, you feel it. You, Mark Ellen, have to tell me which of those is not a saucy advertising slogan, but is actually a James Brown song.
I've got a terrible feeling that I know the answer. And that's because I think I know the advertising slogan, and I think I know some of the James Brown songs. I think it's the advertising slogan I recognise. When it fits, you feel it, is a James Brown song.
No, you'd be wrong.
No! No!
That is an advertisement slogan used by the American retailer J.C. Penney.
No, so I got it right because there's only one. There's only one advertising. So I got it wrong first time.
No. There's only one that's a James Brown song. That's what I told you. Anyway.
Oh! I've got it the wrong way around. Okay, fine. Okay,
right.
When it fits, you feel it. Okay.
So which of those is
good
James
to the last
Brown?
drop is an advertising slogan.
It's Maxwell House Coffee.
It is. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. That's an advertising slogan.
It is. It's Timex watches.
Timex watches, yeah. It's so big. It's so big you grin to get it up? What's that?
You've got to grin to get it in.
The grin to get it in. So big, the grin to get it in. That's an advertising slogan.
It is. It's the wagon wheel. It's wagon wheels.
That's so brilliant. Oh, my Lord. For goodness sakes, look at those cakes. That's got to be an advertising slogan. It just has to be, doesn't it?
Well, you're wrong.
No.
That's the James Brown song. For goodness sakes, look at those cakes.
Look at those cakes. That is fantastic.
So, is it in you? Is Gatorade. It's so big you got to grin to get it in. Whereas advertising wagon wheels. And as we said, Maxwell House Coffee. But for goodness sakes, look at those cakes.
That's really good.
It's a James Brown tune.
Well, I stumbled at the first. That's absolutely brilliant.
I've got another one for next week.
Well done.
I'll hold it over.
Well done. That's really good.
So, I'm not being deliberately controversial when I say that there's no doubt that the entertainment event of the week was. I'm not seeking to shock anybody. Was the funeral of the Queen.
Completely gripping.
Because regardless of what you think of the significance of the institution or whatever, it was the most extraordinary piece of high-wire theatre I've ever seen in my life. I watched the whole thing, and can I just say, I took the key decision, which I think is going to guide all my TV viewing in future, which is when I turned on the BBC iPlayer, I was on my own at home, turned on the BBC iPlayer, the first thing it offered me was the option of commentary or no commentary. And so I clicked no commentary. God, was I glad I did that.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, actually, I watched the BBC one, and again, the whole thing.
This was the BBC, but it was
But you can get without commentary. I mean, the commentary was quite spare, and they didn't try and engineer it in any way to try and make you feel a certain way. It was just fact. It was kind of, that's who that president is, and that's who that famous person is. And that was quite interesting. But I know what you mean, because we get so tired of being told how we should respond emotionally.
And this is not just state occasions. The same thing applies to football. Same thing applies to absolutely anything that you watch where they're covering a kind of live event. They're trying to shape the narrative all the time rather than just letting you decide about the narrative yourself. So I watched the whole thing, and occasionally consulting the BBC website where they would have an order of service, so I'd know what was going to come next. And you knew what order they were processing and that kind of thing. So that was a useful background. But I spent the whole thing watching, because I'm fascinated by just rehearsal and preparation in anything. Theatre, rock and roll, absolutely anything.
Well,
I'm just fascinated.
We both saw the incredible footage of the nighttime rehearsal.
Well, you see, that was
just incredible. It was at about 3:00 in the morning. They started.
Well, that's the point. That's my point. I watched the whole thing. I thought, how have they possibly prepared for this?
Yeah.
Because you can't take Olympia and kind of, and run it, because you're doing this on the streets of London.
You've got to be in the actual streets you're going to walk down. You've got to be turning those corners. Because, when you looked at it and you saw just tiny details, like a platoon of soldiers turning 90 degrees to the left, and the ones on the far left have got to take slightly shorter steps, and each one along the line to their right has got to take about an inch longer step. And they're doing all this while playing a clarinet.
Absolutely.
And looking like a fabulously well-oiled machine. You think, how on earth would you work that out? It's astonishing.
And it's all preparation, because we saw, and I think they probably filmed this first, but were only allowed to show it, only allowed to put it on YouTube after it had occurred. Forces Television, which is a channel, were obviously out there at 2:00 in the morning a few days before, when they ran through the whole thing. And when I say ran through the whole thing, they ran through the whole thing in full fig. Absolutely everybody wearing the full uniform.
Oh, dress rehearsal. Busby's on.
Playing the music, absolutely everything done, as it was going to be on the day, which is just, I thought it was the most astonishing example of the power of presentation.
But there were bits, you and I were texting each other throughout, before I actually went out to see the cavalcade go through West London, because they went 300 yards from the top of our road. We had to go and have a look. But we were texting, one of the things we were both finding absolute agony was when they lifted the coffin, when they were going up steps with the coffin.
Oh, they're bearer parties.
I know, we became obsessed with the idea of how did they keep the orb and sceptre from falling off? Were they bolted on? And you were saying that you didn't actually see on live TV the moment where they shouldered the coffin. Is that right?
I don't think
you did. They deliberately
you saw it just before that, and then they went to a wide shot,
yeah.
and then you got a tight shot once it was there. I was reading a thing in the Times subsequent that those guys have just returned from active duty in Iraq and have returned already. Which is just,
no kidding. God.
These are not toy soldiers.
No, absolutely.
they're real serving guardsmen, and to come back and do that, and you thought I couldn't take my eyes off these guys. I thought the Archbishop of Canterbury is not under the pressure you're under. Nobody taking part in this is under the pressure those guys.
Can you imagine if you stumbled holding I find it agony to watch.
Anything.
But it's struck me that we are so supremely brilliant. I think we should form a kind of a pageants are us company and lay on these events for for people abroad. You know, you lend them the costumes and the bands and the gold coaches and the gun carriages and the battalions of horses, and they can CGI the odd castle into the background, because we've got it all, haven't we? We're just
I tell you what, I only realised afterwards that, you know, I thought, how are they keeping the rhythm of this going all the way through? You know, because the drums were beating all the way through, all the way back up to the Wellington Arch or whatever it's called in Hyde Park Corner, and apparently it was set at 75 beats per minute. That is the BPM of the kind of
a marching band.
No,
or a state funeral.
Of a funeral march.
Yeah, because that'd be slightly slower,
which is different. So, you know, 75 BPM. It's extraordinary.
I love the way that the media tends to look for brilliant angles on these things, like the kind of heroes and villains angles. And there were two really good ones. The TV one was kind of, who's too big to go on the bus? Joe Biden wouldn't go on the bus, but Trudeau would go on the bus. So Trudeau comes out of that looking really good. And then, of course, on Twitter, there was the kind of the queue jumping thing, you know, which is Beckham versus Schofield.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an absolute, it's still running, and it's absolutely gripping.
David
Beckham queued up for the entire 13 hours or whatever. And Philip Schofield was ushered in to kind of pay his respects.
Yeah, I haven't got into the details of the Schofield thing, but it's clearly... It's sent a chill through ITV land, hasn't it? That's,
completely.
That whole thing. I don't know the rights and wrongs of it.
Oh, no, it's really complicated, because, I mean, they were going in as reporters, and quite a lot of other reporters went in too, but we never saw them. They just happened to go through the wrong door, which picked them up on the TV coverage.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of other people in there. I mean, we don't know about.
So
but by the same token, I'm still thoroughly rooting for David Beckham. I mean, he may well have had ulterior motives. You know, there may be a knighthood he's got his eye on. I don't know, but at least he did it. I thought it was fantastic that he did.
I think David Beckham sits there and thinks, "What would David Beckham do?" And then he decides that's what he'd do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he goes and does that. I don't think he's cynical. I just think he understands the responsibility to be David Beckham and to do things, you know, that
he does. And I learnt a new word too, catafalque.
Oh, yeah.
Catafalque, a word I'd never heard, which is the plinth, the kind of ornate plinth that the coffin was on.
Yeah.
There was some lovely comments about that. There was a story about two people who met in the queue and had fallen in love. And David Quantick tweeted this thing. It just said, catafalque of love. Which I thought was really good. Little Lou Reed reference there.
So there was the entertainment.
My phone pinging.
There was the entertainment event of the week.
It was fantastic.
No competition at all.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
I was reminded this morning when we talked to Dave Rimmer, our old pal from Smash Hits. We're just doing a podcast with him about his book that he wrote called Like Punk Never Happened. And Dave was at Smash Hits along with various other people, including Neil Tennant. Neil and Dave always used to sit by the record player, and I can remember them playing us in the office, playing Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, The Message. And which was, this is amazing, it was 40 years ago, Dave, this week. I just looked it up. But that was a hit. 19th of September 1982. Isn't that something?
So if you do the usual calculations, I can never resist doing on these occasions.
Yeah.
Go 40 years back from 1982.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had the Battle of El Alamein yet.
No, we haven't. Incredible. It's absolutely astonishing. We're in the Second World War. I know. But I can remember hearing that record and thinking, I mean, now, of course, you hear it, and it sounds like the root of all hip-hop, which to some extent it probably was, actually. But I can remember hearing it and thinking, I have never heard anything like this before.
No,
I remember Neil explaining that these were musicians who weren't really musicians. You know, that Grandmaster Flash was a DJ. Grandmaster Flash had just spun records, and that's what he did. He hadn't mastered any instrument. I remember thinking that was absolutely extraordinary. And it struck me that there are only a few moments when you hear a record and you think that is completely new. You know, Oh Superman by Laurie Anderson. You remember that? I remember hearing that and thinking, I've never. I Feel Love by Donna Summer. I thought was absolutely.
I Feel Love. Well, famously, Brian Eno took that to the studio, didn't he? Where David Bowie was making whatever record he was making, and said, "In future, all records will sound like this." And he was
and he was absolutely right.
He was right. Whereas Oh Superman was strange and fresh, but it led nowhere.
No, it led nowhere. That's true. No, I mean, the model by Kraftwerk did lead somewhere.
The message led to loads of things. I Feel Love led to loads of things.
Yeah, it did. It did. There are one-off records like The Days of Pearly Spencer by David McWilliams. That probably didn't lead anywhere either, but it was just absolutely extraordinary sound.
Yeah.
Do you remember that when it came out? Just listen to anything. I nothing, no precedent for this.
I can remember also, and it can't have been that much longer, later, when White Lines Don't Do It came out. And that was similarly, revolutionary. And also the idea they were message records, weren't they? They had something to say. And there was genuinely something to say. It wasn't just put together by a producer. It's no accident those records still sound absolutely extraordinary.
They do.
Today,
They really do.
They sound really, really fresh and really hard. Didn't you interview Grandmaster?
Well, yes, I did. I did interview the Grandmaster. I was doing stuff for the Kid Jensen show. In fact, I was sitting in for Kid Jensen, who was on holiday, that's right. And they said, look, we can get an interview with Grandmaster Flash, but Sugar Hill Records have offered us this. And I said, we've got to do that. That'd be fantastic. And they trailed this thing just indefinitely, just constantly. It was a really big deal. And I went over there to the studio, and we got this guy got him on the phone, and I was amazed by how I seemed to know far more about his life than he did. I was asking him about his collaboration with Curtis Blow and Love Bug Starsky, and the time he met Melly Mel. He seemed to be a bit vague about all this, and the kind of basic mechanics of scratching records. And again, it just seemed a little bit all over the place. But it was okay, and we got a few comments. But he gave absolutely nothing away. It was fundamentally very boring, actually. And we put it out after a fair amount of editing. And a bit later, Steve Taylor, who was worked at The Face, who we knew, you remember Steve Taylor?
Yeah.
He was over in New York, he was doing something on Sugar Hill Records. And they said, we had Radio 1 did an interview the other day, but they wanted Grandmaster Flash, but he wasn't around, so we just got this bloke who's happened to be in the office to sit in and do it. And I thought, oh my God, I was right. I suspected something was slightly amiss. Never dared mention it to.
It's a collector's item, that is.
It is.
Yeah. Anybody who's got a recording of that, we would very much appreciate hearing it.
Yeah.
So that's Grandmaster Flash and the message. New thing, Mark. We talked to loads of people who got books, and a certain number of them are musicians. Sometimes it seems that every musician who could write an autobiography has, if not in the fullness of time, in the last 2 years, they've turned out an autobiography, haven't they? Because musician after musician, and you talk to them, you say, "Why do you do it?" "Oh, I had nothing else to do. I sat down and did it," and then get an advance and so forth. And so we often think about who are the shrinking cohort of musicians who could write a book that we really like to read, but haven't done. Okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to call this, They've Got a Book in Them. Okay?
Yeah.
They've got a book in them. And I'll go first, shall I? Have you
so,
got one?
Is he going to be a musician?
Well,
Could be anybody. You go on.
It's a surprise to me. Okay, I'm going to start with it. I'll tell you who's got a book in them that I would dearly, dearly like to read, and will probably never appear, is Ry Cooder.
Oh, God, yes.
A Ry Cooder book, because Ry Cooder is a unique individual. And just go through the things that made him unique, brought up by very radical parents in the 40s and 50s in Santa Monica, had a terrible accident when he was a young child, somehow involving a knife in his eye, which resulted in the loss of one eye.
He has a glass eye, doesn't he? Yeah, yeah.
And his parents bought him a guitar to give him something to do. And it's classic case of the old thing of, kids who spend a lot of their time in solitary life because of illness or an accident, whatever, very often develop extraordinary talents. And Ry Cooder clearly did this, because by the time he was 15 or 16, he was, he was in the Rising Suns with Taj Mahal, And anybody who heard him in California just thought, that guy's absolutely astonishing.
Astonishing, yeah.
His utter mastery of the guitar. And it wasn't mastery like he learned how to play like, I don't know, Blind Willie Johnson or whatever. He learned how to play in a way that was completely his own. It was, it had traces of all those people, but it was his own. And then he was in Captain Beefheart's magic band in the early days, and clearly did the arrangements, and he was the musical director.
Yeah.
And just walked out when they were just about to do the Monterey Festival, because Beefheart had walked off stage and fallen off stage during a show. And Ry Cooder just thought, I can't be dealing with this clown anymore. I'm a professional musician. This guy's a show off. And, so then went off and then nearly joined the Rolling Stones, for crying out loud.
He did.
He was over here, recording at Olympic with the Rolling Stones. Then went off and did his own wonderful solo records. And, did things like Little Village with John Hyatt and Nick Lowe and Jim Kellner. And in almost every case, when he got anywhere near any commercial success, he just turned on his heel and went away, because he's too much of a purist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's kind of oddly snobbish view of most rock musicians.
Yeah.
And that's what I would like to read.
And you've still
about.
got the Buena Vista Social Club story to come.
Absolutely.
Which is
all
astonishing. Yeah.
All those things. And now he's back, he's been working with his son, and he's back he recorded with a live band, a few years ago. And he's done absolutely everything he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Clearly according to his own rules, while being really bad-tempered about it almost all the way through.
Yes.
As if he doesn't feel anybody quite comes up to his standards. That's what I'd like to read about.
Yeah.
I'd love to read that story of a genuine musician who's got really interesting views on other musicians. I interviewed him. It must have been about 1980 or something like that. I can't remember which album, Bop Tio Drop or one of those records. And I said I was very taken by the fact that he was doing these songs while blind Alfred Reed, always lifting up and these kind of things. And I put this to him, he said, yes, I've always been attracted to songs with a certain gravity about them. And I remember, I can remember where I was when he said that to me. I thought, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
And you interview musicians for bloody years and they never say anything as interesting as that. The word gravity, I thought, most musicians don't reach for that at all, you know what I mean? And that was the way he looked at music and has looked at music all the way through. So I would
remember
love to
interviewing
read.
Leonard Cohen, and Leonard Cohen said, that I think the purpose of music is to stop the mind from spinning. And to confer a sense of peace and calm. And I thought that was just a wonderful thing. As if the mind is constantly this troubled thing that needs the anchoring of listening to music. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So that's my nomination.
That's good.
I would like to read a Ry Cooder autobiography. It'll never happen. What's yours?
Oh, well, mine actually, I'll do it very briefly. Is actually a non-musician, but although musician-wise, the biography I'd love to read is Neil Tennant's. I mean, Neil Tennant.
Oh, that's true.
Neil Tennant's still not written his, and
might
has
be
met
in it.
absolutely everybody. And you and I have heard, his stories about Lisa Minnelli and Dusty Springfield, which are just fantastic. Really, really briefly, there's a guy that we interviewed once on the pod, Bernard Doherty.
Oh, that's
Bernard
true.
Doherty has lived an extraordinary life. Very briefly, he told us about it. He started off working in dance halls as a DJ.
You don't have to do it briefly, Mark, at all.
Yeah.
And a reminder. And anybody who wants to know more, there is, just look on YouTube. We've done a long interview with Bernard. He was fantastic.
It's a fantastic life. And he started off, I think when he's 16 or 17, in the 1960s as a DJ in dance halls. So amazing stuff about fashion and music and people. He hung around the Marquee Club and the Flamingo Club. He saw absolutely everybody in Hendrix and Cream, Floyd, etc., etc. Then he got a job aged, I think about 18, at Basildon and Ilford Mecca ballrooms. And then at age 19, he worked for a year in Copenhagen and Stockholm as a full. I mean, that I think would be a real insight. Came back, became a PR, and the thing about being a PR is that
before Bernard was a PR. He worked for
he's a roadie.
Richard Thompson's management. And so he drove Richard and Linda Thompson. He roadied Richard and Linda Thompson.
He did. In fact, he lived with Richard Thompson, I think, for a while, didn't he? He lived
all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and Joe Lustig worked for Joe Lustig.
Joe Lustig,
that's the guy who managed Sea Lice Band and Pentacle, so all those kind of people.
Yeah.
Then briefly, actually, he was he worked for Joe Boyd's Hannibal Records, so all that stuff about Nick Drake and Incredible String Band, phenomenal. But when he became a PRs, I think, are a bit like. They have a relationship with people a bit like hairdressers or photographers or costumiers or whatever. They're there to make you look good. Yes. And they're never going to say anything bad about you, not publicly anyway. And therefore you're protected by that relationship and they become confidants. People see the star on the back foot if they're the PR. They're constantly trying to bail them out of some terrible situation. And he told us these wonderful stories about being on the road with Jethro Tull, just standing in and doing phone interviews for Ian Anderson, just making up what Ian Anderson would say because Ian Anderson couldn't be bothered to do it, and working for Fairport Convention and stuff. And then, of course, he finishes with Live Aid. He was the PR at Live Aid, which would be absolutely fantastic to hear about. And then, for the rest of his life, has still been working with the Stones. Yes. Now, it may require the Stones to actually shuffle off their mortal coils before he tells us anything really. And he probably won't write this book until he retires, and he probably won't retire in the near future. But Bernard Doherty has a fantastic book.
I would read it. I would read it.
He really does.
That reminds me of another one, actually, who also ought to write a book and never will, but who also Bernard will know is Tony King.
Oh yeah,
Tony King, who worked for the Stones on and off over the years, and I first met Tony King when I went to Barbados to interview Mick Jagger, and we went out for a meal. And Tony he's fantastically entertaining character. His first job, he got a job in the record business in the late 60s at the age of about 15. I said, what did you have to do? He said, well, the first thing I did was took Brenda Lee to the cinema.
Fantastic.
And he just went on, he told he spent time with John and Yoko at the Dakota, he worked for the Beatles, by the Rolling Stones, and hilariously funny. And over dinner in Barbados, fantastically indiscreet.
About who? About what sort of people?
Oh, just all sorts
Everybody.
of things. He told me the famous story about the International Gay Fraternity being told that Elton was getting married.
Oh, yes.
And this is getting married to a woman, for, just to remind ourselves.
Renata.
There was once.
German sound engineer.
There was once, and... He was in Australia, I think I'm right in saying. No, I can't remember. He was a long way away.
And he had to ring up McCartney and Rod Stewart.
He got a call from Elton saying, you've got to be in London. It took place in London, I think. In a couple of days, I'm getting married. And he said, what? And anyway, he got a plane ticket and he got on the plane and it was Qantas. So I think he was in Australia. He may not have been. And he told a fantastic story about the kind of international gay glitterati slowly making their way into business class on this flight going back to London, where they were met by a load of Qantas stewards, similarly gay, similarly absolutely amazed.
Stunned.
They were all just looking.
I know. Yeah, I know.
What is this all about? So he used to tell me all these extraordinary stories. He was fantastically entertaining. Ought to write a book.
So still with us, obviously.
Still with us, as far as I know. Yeah. Because, definitely. Yeah. So I'm sure got many years still left in him. God bless him. Tony King, that's a book you'll never read.
The Word Podcast, 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string.
Well, I got a bit of a jolt this morning reading the sad news of the death of Hilary Mantel at the age of 70. Very suddenly,
I know, 70.
Apparently. But she had not enjoyed good health throughout her life. I think that's fair to say, So, terrible tragedy. I know,
as you and I always say when we hear about people dying so young, it's Warren Zevon's great maxim, isn't it? Enjoy every sandwich.
Enjoy every sandwich.
I know.
Fine piece of advice. To go alongside Keith Richards, the older you get, the older you want to get.
Yeah.
But Hilary Mantel has been kind of front of mind for me of late because it's one of the things the Wolf Hall trilogy was one of the things I reread during lockdown. Because I read The Mirror and the Light, which is the third in the trilogy. And then I thought, there's only one thing to do with it when you finish it, is go back to the beginning and start again, you know. And just thinking about her again today after this sad news, I think I'm going to have to go and read it again.
Yeah, the third
because
time.
It's one of those things that the more you get into, the more time you can spend there. But the amazing thing to me is that it was such a bestseller. And it's kind of not easy, you know what I mean? It's not an ingratiating read at all. It doesn't make it easy for you at all. It's quite flat. It's very dense, and it kind of takes a second read through to get to the point where you think, no, I really want to live in this place. You know, it takes you to an utterly alien, strange place. You know, it doesn't try and connect it with the now in any way. And I found it absolutely transporting, just really, really extraordinary. And then I went and saw the stage play, and I watched the telly thing, and insofar as I could deal with it, and then went back to the book again. You know.
I've never read it, but I saw her talk at Cheltenham Festival. She was fantastic, and she read great chunks of it out. She was absolutely brilliant. Also, it's interesting. She was 57 when that came out. I mean, so often authors require that self-belief. I mean, not that she was unsuccessful. Of course, she was unsuccessful. She was making a reasonable living, but she didn't break through till she was 57.
No, that really is breaking through.
That was just breaking to completely into another league.
Did you ever see the pictures of her study? She obviously made so much money out of it, and she could afford to kind of do to her dwelling place whatever she wanted to do. And she lived in Devon, I think, somewhere, certainly overlooking the sea, beautiful, overlooking a bay. And she had the most enormous, sweeping picture window right round the place, so that she worked overlooking the sea.
How would you get any work done?
How would you get any work done?
Never, ever. You'd just be looking out the window going, oh, look, little fishing boat.
Well, just the
seagull.
The sea never runs out of interest, does
No.
it? Absolutely never.
But what a formula, the historical novel, because those have sold surely far more than any history books have sold. No matter what, no matter what Peter Ackroyd sold, no matter what Anthony Beevor sold, the novelisation, fictionalisation of a true story is the real commercial.
But also to pick a character so unsympathetic on the face of it.
I know.
A man who history despised. You know what I mean? And to make him the hero of these three books, it's extraordinary. I'm going to read you a tiny bit that I noted down when I read it, and I found it again. Which just gives you some idea of how great she was. And this is Thomas Cromwell when he's spared somebody's life, which he was obviously in a position to do from time to time, because Thomas Cromwell at the court of Henry VIII was a little bit like being a cabinet minister for Vladimir Putin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could go either way at any juncture. But anyway, he spared somebody, and the chapter finishes as follows: "There's a feeling of power in reserve, a power that drives through the bone, like the shiver you sense in the shaft of an axe when you take it into your hand. You can strike or you cannot strike, and if you choose to hold back the blow, you can still feel inside you the resonance of the emitted thing."
Fantastic.
The resonance
to end on the word "thing" too is just genius, isn't it?
The resonance of the emitted thing.
Yeah.
And you can, it's the idea you pick up a tool that can do great damage.
Yeah.
You put it down. You can still feel in your wrist the damage you could have done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You pick up a hammer or anything like that, You're struck by the idea of what you could do.
Potential,
and you put
destructive
it down.
power.
You can still feel it within your wrist. So, a great writer, very, very sad.
Very sad. So young, I know.
Absolutely.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
It's another birthday special on the pod with Ed Newman, who's a neurologist at Glasgow Royal Infirmary, which is where you are now, Ed, I think.
I am. I'm in
on a shift.
That's right. In a small office in the Royal.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Well, look,
so
happy
you're not
birthday.
not in costume. It's actual work.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't just do it to impress people.
Yeah. Do you know? Since COVID, we've all been wearing scrubs, and it just there's no sartorial decisions to make in the morning, so it's which is really
very
good.
Nice uniform.
Oh right. Fair
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for a uniform, actually.
You don't have to worry about being achingly
My main quarrel with hospitals on the rare occasions I go in there is I think people ought to have more uniforms. You ought to be able to see the level of seniority.
Yes.
Do you know,
seriously.
I mean, there has been fun over. I've been working for the NHS for 20 years now, and there are there were times where with nursing staff the seniority was based on how dark their costume, their outfits were. So black was the charge nurse, and it got sort of lighter the more junior they were. But yeah, but then as soon as anyone gets used to it, then they change it all completely again.
But that's a good system. Surgeons yellow, just doctors red.
I think the more senior they were, the more tweed they wore when they were really senior.
Yeah, the more you trust them and feel comfortable.
They were really senior. They weren't there at all. They were on the golf course.
It's not quite like that anymore. But
no, I'm sure.
Wearing a deer stalker, smoking a pipe.
As Mark and I are thinking about the 50s. Yeah. Anyway, right. Your birthday was when? It was a while ago.
It was in early August. And it was spent in Ely and Fife, and it was really good. It was really good. But
right. Now, have you got a log to throw on the word in your ear, fire, or a question or anything you'd like to put to us?
I've got a question, and then I've got a book pitch for you.
Right. Right. What, expecting us to publish it?
To write it.
To write it for you.
So I'll be brief with the question because you might not find it too interesting. But I think in the last year, so I really enjoy podcasts, and in the last year I've started listening to two podcasts which are devoted to kind of either a band or an individual. So I'm listening to Is It Rolling Bob for Bob Dylan.
Yeah, very right.
And I'm listening to the Egg podcast
they're both great.
For the Beatles, and they're fantastic. And I'm just curious, and I'm sure there are lots of other single artist podcasts that are around there. But surely there aren't that many individuals that you could do that for.
Because I'm sure you're right. I mean, the Beatles and Bob Dylan. We always used to find this in magazines. You always used to think, let's do a feature where we get 10 examples of something, and you'd always go, well, there's the Beatles, and then you go, there's Bob Dylan, and then you're thinking, you're scratching around.
You're chewing the end of your pencil.
Because they are just they're two artists who are just so productive. Well, particularly Bob Dylan, because he'd been doing it for so long. You know what I mean?
But
that stuff.
But there's also something where I think with this, or even divorced from the music, the story of the Beatles is so fascinating, and Bob Dylan is such a fascinating character. That there's material there, and you kind of think that if there might be people whose music is almost as interesting, but but the narrative just doesn't suit 400 episodes.
No, but a lot of it's about sheer volume. I'm sure there are Grateful Dead podcasts, there's just so much of it. But it's not really about the specifics of the music. It's just that particular version or whatever. I think Steely Dan's a possibility, but I don't know. Steely Dan, there's just huge musical variety and huge lyric interest in all sorts of angles you could approach them.
I tried a Tom Waits one, but it didn't quite work. And I love Tom Waits, but just maybe it was the format, and maybe having the right person and getting the right interviewees is a big part of it. But I don't think. I think
also with the Beatles and Bob Dylan, actually, are fantastic human stories, aren't they? They're not kind of music business stories. They're human, and I don't think you could do the same thing about Pink Floyd or loads of groups. Listen, the Beatles, Mark and I went only the other day to a run-through of Mark Lewison's new show, which is all about 62 things about 1962. And And Mark and I know a ridiculous amount about the Beatles, and we're sitting there with Ian Birch, and there's
surrounded by probably 200 people who know probably more than we do, and all of us, weren't we, Dave? We're looking at each other at various points, going, "I never knew that." Absolutely astonishing. So even if you've gone in there and found one thing,
and also the Beatles, there's so much documentation. He was showing us, letters written to George Harrison by fans in 1962 or whatever, and his replies. And I just don't think that stuff exists on that scale.
Well, no, the digital world, that's all going to be gone. All those programs, the fan letters, the tickets, the contracts, all that stuff that you can go and find,
But he's particularly good at doing it, though. Mark Lewison is a great writer, and it puts you. And even though you think the amazing, I think I read a Beatles book every year, and there's something there's something comforting about it. See was it the Craig Brown book 1, 2, 3, 4 a couple of summers ago? You just it was just, how have you made something that you think so fascinating? You can still dive back into it. You can
tell me the old story, isn't it?
Well, he does. He's got a brilliant technique, Craig Brown, because all of those are human anecdote stories. They're all about people, all about human interaction. They're meeting people. They're not about factual things that happened or complications about a mix or whatever. But it's amazing that your capacity to be astonished. I realised during the Mark Lewison thing that he'd got a picture of the Beatles in front of a warehouse in Liverpool, and he'd gone back and found that warehouse, and it was still there, and found a picture of Bob Dylan in front of the same warehouse. And I don't know why those things are so enthralling. Just seeing people in front of landmarks that are still there and you recognise, and you can physically go to them.
The amazing thing for me in that thing, and I wanted to ask him about this, but I thought, no, it's too tiny a point. He talked about how Decca didn't sign the Beatles. Decca signed the Tremolos instead, Brian Poole and the Tremolos, because they were closer. They were in Dagenham, And he had a piece from the Dagenham newspaper about the Tremolos signing to Decca. And I thought, how do you come upon that? Because I understand how you can chase every bit of detail about the Beatles and everybody around them, but how do you can't possibly do the same about the Tremolos or all the million characters around the side. I suppose it's just basically when he finds anything, he puts it away in a filing cabinet, doesn't he? And then it finds a use many, many years later, But it's astonishing. So I don't know if you get. Well, you're in Glasgow, so you won't get a chance to see.
No, it's only in London.
It's only in London.
Do you want my book pitch?
Go on, let's have the book pitch.
Go on.
So the seeds of this were sown when I was a first year medical student, and I went to the professor of ophthalmology did a talk on. He was talking about introducing a couple of kind of eye problems, and he talked about cataracts, and he talked about myopia and glaucoma and a few other things. And he illustrated the visual disturbance that patients who experience cataracts by getting the early paintings of Claude Monet and comparing it to the later paintings. So the idea being, it's getting hazier, it's getting, and the point
more
that
impressionist.
And as time goes on, and actually arguing that the Impressionists were all myopic, and that's that they're short-sighted, and that's kind of why that they, some of them were seeing it that way. Anyway, it's a bit of a ruse to get you to understand a bit more about these things. And I thought that actually you could do this a bit for music. And I'm not talking about musicians who develop diseases. I'm talking about diseases that have an impact on the development of musicians. So one of the classic ones is from the classical world is, are you familiar with Bolero by Maurice Ravel?
Yeah.
Right. At school I had to play that, and it's the whole thing about it is it's a 16-minute repeating thing over and over and over again. It's hypnotic, but it's an awful thing to have to play.
Right.
And so the latest theory is that Maurice Ravel developed frontotemporal dementia, and frontotemporal dementia is one of the features of it is that repetition thing is very much part of it. You keep asking the same question, you keep doing the same thing again and again and again. So within medical literature, it's kind of thought, well, this is a musical illustration of a disease. Now, if you want to move into like kind of popular music, I thought of a couple. So Joni Mitchell's the obvious one. So she gets polio when she's young, and it affects her left side more than her right side. She's unable to make the chord shapes that you would normally make, and so she has to use certain tunings, and it's those tunings that influence the type of songs that she writes as a young musician and influences her development. You could argue about, whether it's Cat Stevens and his tuberculosis, or Neil Young and his epilepsy, all these kind of things. I just think, you guys are the writers, but I think there's something.
Are you talking about people whose afflictions have somehow
shaped
improved and shaped? Because a good example, if that's the case, a good example of that might be Induri, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Induri,
100%.
because he couldn't move on stage. I saw him loads of times. Lit himself in this incredible way from below. It was extraordinarily good at expressing a variety of things with just his face and just a few facial movements, And he's a good example, I think, possibly.
But also at the same time, there's a bit of a parallel thing there, which subject that Mark and I often talk about, and we keep compiling lists and then losing the lists. A huge number of really successful musicians spent a year or so in hospital when they were kids.
Yeah,
and they were cut off from normal education.
Neil Young.
Joni Mitchell is the classic. Yeah, absolutely. And during that time, they very often learned an instrument because it was just something they could do. And they developed an ability to focus that probably their healthier peers maybe didn't,
And developed their imaginations.
Yeah, but also the discipline to play something. Because it requires, you've got to work at it quite hard at a stage where lots of 15-year-olds just want to go out and chase girls or whatever. And these people were stuck in hospitals.
I think there's something in it.
I think there's something in it, and I think you should do it. You need a medical man. Anybody else would be getting completely out beyond their competence. But no, I think that there is something in it. I mean, and also that, I don't know how wide you take it, but, there is that also that feeling that you meet really successful musicians, and on one level you think there's something wrong with you. You function in a way that's not like normal people. The music is a compensation for something else. I
interviewed Roger Waters once, and he told me, I was talking about the level of success that he achieved, and there are only certain people who want that level of success. And he said people like myself have holes in our psychology that need to be filled with adulation. It's a really honest thing to say, actually.
It is.
And there's a complicated guy, his father died, I think, before he was born. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think he ever met his father.
I think his father was killed while his mother was pregnant during the war.
Italy. Yeah.
He was born in 43 or something. That's right. So, I mean, that's a complicated guy. Once you know that tiny thing about him, it actually explains part of his extraordinary drive.
I think there's a lot of obsessive compulsive disorder in music. Yeah. And again, I think that's down to learning an instrument. I mean, you see it in obviously sport is the obvious example. So someone like David Beckham having to take the same free kick, hundreds of times.
Johnny Wilkinson is the classic case. Johnny Wilkinson, he's mad. If it wasn't for rugby.
But there are medical terms. There are medical terms for what he does for his routine and the movements that he makes before he kicks. So I think that you can, and if you look at certain musicians, you'll see that. If we stop recording, I could sort of mention a couple because I'm not comfortable recording and saying it.
No, don't worry. Actually, David and I went to the tennis in the summer, and so was it Nadal, Dave? Was it Rafa Nadal who had that incredible routine that he did?
Oh, Nadal's bizarre.
Where he touches his shoulders and his
in absolutely the same order every time.
And in the same order every time. Then pats the ball the same number of times and just goes through his routine. And unless he's done that, he can't settle down. It's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, but guitarists will have their same settling routine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And vocalists, no doubt.
Yeah. Very good.
There's something in it.
it's a good idea for a book. You should write it. We'll Mark and I'll put something on the blurb. When
man
you get
looking
it
for
done.
book deal.
Excellent.
Recommended.
All right.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, yeah, you have to introduce me to a publisher.
Yeah.
They're signing
not
up
difficult.
doctors like the no tomorrow at the
That's
moment.
right. Yeah, that's right. That's
It's
right.
it's a growing area. I would have thought you got a very good shout there. You got a better shout at getting a publishing deal with a thing like that if you are a doctor than if you're just a writer.
Completely. The
Because
doctor
you go in
writes.
there saying, "No, I will tell you the secrets. I'll tell you how this works."
Yeah.
And then you got to just go work out how to write it. That's the easy bit. Well, lovely to see you. Thanks for. I'm sorry we're late with your
Not
birthday.
at all,
but,
not
you
at all.
know,
Yeah. Sorry
better
to
late than never.
butt in on your working hours.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink and it's like being in the pub.
Okay. Any other business? Sorry, just a bit of fun. I said I got another Stackwaddy game. I can't resist.
Go on, do it. Do
I'm
it.
going to try it on both
I'm all ears.
the two of you. This is similar thread. Advertising slogan or Frank Zappa track. Okay.
Good.
Advertising slogan or Frank Zappa track. Here we go. You might want to write these down. I'd walk a mile for a camel. I'd walk a mile for a camel.
How many of each are there then?
There's just one that's an actual Zappa track. The rest
Yep.
are advertising slogans. What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Is that a Frank
Yeah.
Zappa song or is it an advertising slogan? Gee, I like your pants. Is that an advertising slogan or is it a Frank Zappa song?
Yeah.
Once you pop, you can't
You
stop.
just can't stop.
Is that an advertising slogan or a Frank Zappa track? The more you play with it, the harder it gets. Is that a Frank Zappa song or is that an advertising slogan? And finally, nothing sucks like an Electrolux. Is that an advertising slogan or is it a Frank Zappa tune? Okay, I got Alex Skeld and I got Mark Allen.
That's very good.
You've got to identify
Okay,
the one
can I-
that's a Frank Zappa tune. Go on, Alex. Everybody always wants more
May
information.
I be so bold?
Go on.
May I be so bold as to dive into what I think are the certs in terms of advertising slogans?
Yeah, go on.
I'd walk a mile for a camel is in fact a cigarette slogan.
That's correct.
Yeah, which is very good because, of course, Zappa had a track called "It Must Be a Camel."
That's
So
right.
that was your.
That's
that
why
was your,
I
that was
chose
your-
that.
I know that was your very clever little ruse there.
Okay, carry on.
What's the worst that could happen? Dr. Pepper.
Hey, he knows.
Very good, very nosy
good.
stuff.
Very good. Carry on.
Once you pop, you just can't
Once you
stop.
pop-
Is Pringles?
Pringles.
isn't it?
Is Pringles.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How about the more you play with it, the harder you get? The harder it
Harder
gets.
it gets. I think that's too obviously a kind of fanar Zappa thing. So it must be an advertising slogan. I think the Zappa one is "Gee, I like your pants."
That's correct.
Because that
That's
couldn't
correct.
possibly be an ad slogan. It's
That's
just too
correct.
over the top.
That's
The
correct.
more you play with, what's the more you play with it, the harder you get. Is
It's
that
Sega. It's Sega. Sega games.
Oh, very good.
And nothing sucks like an
an
Electrolux.
Electrolux.
Obviously.
Is Electrolux? That's right. Those are very good, Dave.
And we were
See, I
talking
thought
about.
that was a big old red herring. I thought that was put there just to trick us. And that
That's
actually that was
very
gonna be
good.
the Zappa
I'm not
slogan,
that
but-
clever. I'm not that clever. Talking about sucks and Electrolux, where we were talking about Captain Beefheart earlier on when we were talking about Ry Cooder. And you know the famous story about Captain Beefheart had a job in his teens, door to door selling vacuum cleaners in the high desert outside Los Angeles. And one day he went knocked on a door, and the man who came to the door was, to his amazement, Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley, the author
Wow.
of Brave New World and whatever else. And so Beefheart was shocked, but managed to compose himself sufficiently to point at the vacuum cleaner at his feet and say, "Sir, this sucks." There you
This
go.
sucks. That's really good, isn't it? Aldous Huxley.
Okay. Any other business, Alex, that we knew we ought to be talking about this week?
Have we got any new patrons,
Yeah.
Magic?
We do. Whatever the collective noun for a group of patrons is, we have some.
It's a blessing of patrons.
It's
a blessing.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's a treasure.
Yeah.
It's our best
Okay.
friends. Yeah, go on.
Indeed.
It's our, actually,
they
sorry,
are-
I interrupt. It's our new best friend.
Go on.
Okay, that's our new best friends. Okay, carry
There
on.
we are. There it is. Okay, so we have Bigsy.
Big Z.
Mysterious
He's good for Big T.
Big Z.
Brian Campbell.
Brian Campbell.
Thank you, Brian. That's very good.
Thank you very much. You're
Welcome
our new
aboard.
best friend, Brian.
Philip Pennington.
Philip, hello, and you,
Excellent.
Philip. No less at all.
John McKay, who's subscribed annually, which means he gets a 15% discount.
Oh,
I bet we know that John McKay.
Oh, really?
Do you think it's Johnny McKay? Do you think it's Johnny McKay or Johnny McKee, as it's pronounced, the former editor of Smash Hits? I think it might be.
Is it John McKay out of Susie and the Banshees?
Oh, could
Or
be
is it
that.
John
Could be, yeah,
McKay who
absolutely,
used
yeah.
to be the editor of
Who did a
Smash
bunk on the tour, didn't he? That's right. Yeah.
Hits?
We should
Anyway.
find out.
And finally, we have a new birthday patron.
Oh.
Oh, good.
Matthew Elliott.
Matthew Elliott. So
Good.
we're going to
Matthew,
be
we look forward to
we're gonna
coming
be-
and rifling through your record collection.
and shinning down your digital drain pipe or up it or whatever, going through your record collection and poking fun at it, frankly, because that's what we do. But
Being occasionally very envious.
people
That'll be good.
People seem to enjoy it. And so if you want to know more about how you can join the Blessed, our new best friends, the place to go is patreon.com/wordinyour-ear, and you look at the various different tiers via which you could get involved and be basking in the sunshine of our love in perpetuity. Actually, have we announced we're having a little Christmas do, aren't we, Alex? We're having a November do. We're having a gathering.
Oh, in November, yes.
Yeah, come on.
What was the
Talk about
date?
this.
We should announce the
30
date.
November,
We'll do it
isn't it?
now. It is. I'm just
That'll
going
be
to tell
November
you.
the 14th.
November the 14th. So if you're a Patreon
It's,
supporter,
yeah, Monday, November the 14th.
and you're in the
evening
London
of.
area, we'd love to welcome you at a London hostelry for a bit of a social. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Further details in due course.
Some form of entertainment. We don't know what yet. It'll be good.
So make sure you make a note of that in your diary, because I know your diary is already filling up with Christmas parties and all kinds of things. But don't forget to add that to it. Anything else that we got to add before we disappear? Alex?
We've done some nice podcasts, didn't we? The one we just did, the one with Dave Rimmer, which will be coming out soon. We did Mark Cooper next week, talking about his later book. Paul Gorman's thing about the music press.
Paul
Totally
Gorman's
wild,
book
which is
about
very
the music
good.
press. Yeah.
So quite a bit.
There's
Giles
very
Martin,
much
we've
concern.
talked to. We're going to talk to Giles Martin. We're going to put that out in about
Yes.
2 weeks' time about his remixing of Revolver. So yeah, good stuff.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.